What would you do if your boss locked you in a bathroom so his mistress could steal the biggest presentation of your career? Imagine you're Rachel Thompson, 30 years old, Harvard MBA, about to walk into the Willis Tower boardroom where 250 Goldman Sachs executives are waiting to hear your revolutionary $75 million acquisition strategy. 6 months of 18-hour days. 6 months of sacrificing everything to perfect the demographic disruption algorithm that could make you the youngest partner in consulting history. Your disabled father's medical bills depend on this moment. Your entire future hangs on the next hour. The executive bathroom door slams shut behind you at 9:47 a.m. Your keycard beeps red. Again and again. HVAC emergency detected, the automated voice announces through hidden speakers as magnetic locks click across the entire floor. But there was no maintenance scheduled today. You memorized every detail of this building's operations. Through the marble walls, you hear Victoria Sterling's heels clicking confidently toward your boardroom. Mr. Wells, I've made last-minute refinements to the acquisition strategy. Her voice carries triumph. Our international guest will be very impressed with the demographic disruption analysis. Your blood freezes. That's your terminology. Your breakthrough discovery. Your proprietary algorithm that Victoria shouldn't even know exists. You pound the reinforced door until your fist bleed, screaming as your life's work is stolen 200 feet away. The Goldman Sachs executives are taking their seats. Marcus Goldman III himself flew in from New York. Bloomberg reporters are preparing to broadcast live to 37 countries. Victoria is about to present your research as her own while you're trapped like a rat in this marble prison. The security system was triggered manually. Someone with administrative access planned this perfectly. But who would orchestrate such elaborate sabotage to destroy your career on the most important day of your life? And what price would you pay to expose the truth? Rachel Thompson never imagined her Harvard MBA would lead to hiding in supply closets to avoid her boss's wandering hands. 10 months ago, she'd walked into Wells Strategic Consulting's gleaming Chicago office on Michigan Avenue with dreams of partnership and a 6-figure salary that could finally give her father the life he deserved. 10 months of Harrison Wells circling her desk like a predator. 10 months of accidental touches during presentations. 10 months of dinner invitations disguised as career development opportunities. Her father, Robert Thompson, had raised her alone after her mother died when Rachel was 12. A union construction foreman for 37 years, Robert had worked every overtime shift available to pay for Rachel's education, his calloused hands building Chicago's skyline while dreaming of his daughter's corporate success. The irony wasn't lost on her that she now worked in the Willis Tower, a building her father had helped construct 20 years earlier. Every morning she'd touch the steel beam in the lobby and think of his sacrifice. But Robert's body had finally betrayed him. A 50-foot fall from scaffolding last year had shattered 3 vertebrae and crushed his left leg. The workers' compensation barely covered basic expenses, let alone the intensive physical therapy at Northwestern Memorial Hospital that offered his only hope of walking again. $8,500 monthly for specialized treatment that insurance classified as experimental rehabilitation. Rachel's McKinsey-level salary was the difference between her father's recovery and a wheelchair for life. Wells knew exactly how to exploit this vulnerability. "Rachel, sweetheart, that promotion to senior consultant comes with a 40% salary increase," he'd whisper during late-night strategy sessions when the office was empty. "Plus premium family health coverage. Your father's medical situation must be so stressful." His hand would linger on her shoulder, fingers pressing just hard enough to make his message clear. "Sleep with me, or watch your father suffer." She'd reported the harassment to HR twice. Both times, Wells' assistant Patricia Manning, a stern woman in her 50s who seemed to worship her boss, had filed the complaints directly with Wells himself. "Mr. Wells is concerned about workplace misunderstandings," Patricia would say, her voice dripping with condescension. "Perhaps you're misinterpreting his mentorship style. He's invested significant resources in your development." The complaints vanished into Wells's personal files, and Rachel learned that justice was a luxury she couldn't afford. Wells Strategic Consulting occupied 3 floors of premium downtown real estate, its glass walls and imported marble designed to impress Fortune 500 clients. Wells had built the firm from nothing 15 years earlier, leveraging his McKinsey training and sociopathic charm to steal clients from established competitors. He bragged constantly about being self-made, conveniently omitting his trust fund inheritance that had bankrolled his startup costs. At 48, Wells had the silver-haired confidence of a man who'd never been told no by anyone who mattered. His obsession with Rachel had intensified after she'd refused his advances at the company Christmas party. Cornered in his private office during the annual celebration, Wells had pressed her against the mahogany desk while 200 employees celebrated downstairs. "You know what you want," he'd breathed, his bourbon-soaked words hot against her ear. Rachel had kneed him hard enough to double him over, then calmly returned to the party as if nothing had happened. The next Monday, her assignments became increasingly impossible, her deadlines unreasonable, her project budgets mysteriously slashed. But Rachel possessed something Wells couldn't steal or manipulate: pure talent. Her analytical mind could dissect complex business problems like a surgeon, finding profit opportunities in companies that seemed hopeless. Her presentation skills were legendary among junior staff. Her financial models so elegant that clients often requested copies for their internal teams. Wells hated that she was better than him, hated that his Harvard MBA couldn't match her intuitive understanding of market dynamics. The Goldman Sachs opportunity had arrived like a gift from heaven. Rachel's strategy for acquiring mid-market financial services companies was brilliant, a complex algorithm that identified undervalued targets with hidden growth potential. 6 months of 18-hour days, weekends at the office while her father waited alone in his rehabilitation center, sacrificing every social connection to perfect a presentation that would revolutionize corporate acquisition strategy. Goldman Sachs had specifically requested her by name after hearing about her previous work with Credit Suisse. Wells had watched her preparation with growing resentment. This presentation would make Rachel untouchable, would give her the leverage to report his harassment to clients and board members who actually mattered. Partnership would mean independence, would mean enough money to pay for her father's treatment without enduring his abuse. Most importantly, success with Goldman Sachs would attract headhunter attention from McKinsey Bain and BCG, competitors who would pay her twice her current salary and provide the respectability Wells's firm could never offer. 3 weeks before the presentation, Victoria Sterling had joined the firm as a senior financial analyst. Stunning in the way that stopped conversations, Victoria possessed an MBA from Wharton and consulting experience with Deloitte. She was also 28 years old, blonde, and seemed to find Wells's jokes genuinely funny. Rachel noticed how Victoria always volunteered for projects that required late-night collaboration with the CEO, how her hemlines grew shorter with each passing week, how Wells's mood improved dramatically whenever Victoria entered the room. But Rachel was too focused on Goldman Sachs to pay attention to office politics. She had exactly one chance to secure her father's future, one presentation to escape Wells' predatory control. Failure meant returning to his mercy, meant choosing between dignity and her father's ability to walk. Success meant freedom for both of them. She should have realized that Harrison Wells would never let her walk away with his dignity intact, would never allow a blue-collar princess to humiliate him in front of the most powerful investment bank in America. But how far would a desperate, obsessed sociopath go to destroy the woman who dared to refuse him? The Goldman Sachs opportunity landed on Rachel's desk like lightning striking twice in the same place. Marcus Goldman III himself had called Wells strategic consulting after hearing whispers about Rachel's revolutionary work with Credit Suisse's European expansion strategy. "We want the Thompson woman," his voice had boomed through Wells' speakerphone during the initial conference call. "Her predictive modeling for mid-market acquisitions is exactly what we need for our next growth phase." Rachel had felt her heart stop as she listened from the hallway, pressed against the mahogany door like a schoolgirl eavesdropping on adult conversations. $75 million. The number haunted her dreams and fueled her 18-hour workdays for the next 6 months. Goldman Sachs wasn't just any client. They were the crown jewel of investment banking, the firm that could catapult her career into the stratosphere or destroy it completely with a single negative review. Success meant partnership, meant her father's medical bills becoming irrelevant pocket change, meant never having to endure Harrison Wells' wandering hands or whispered threats again. Failure meant professional exile from every major consulting firm in America. Rachel had always possessed an unusual gift for seeing patterns where others saw chaos. While her Harvard classmates struggled with complex financial models, Rachel could intuitively grasp the hidden relationships between market forces, demographic shifts, and technological disruptions. Her Goldman Sachs strategy was pure genius, a sophisticated algorithm that identified undervalued mid-market financial services companies with explosive growth potential hidden beneath poor management or temporary market conditions. The research consumed her completely. Every morning at 5 a.m., she'd arrive at the Michigan Avenue office before the cleaning crew finished their rounds, spreading financial reports across 3 conference tables like a general planning a military campaign. Deutsche Bank's expansion failures in Southeast Asia, Credit Agricole's surprising success in African microfinance, Santander's brilliant cryptocurrency hedge strategy. She analyzed every major acquisition from the past decade, searching for patterns that Goldman Sachs could exploit. Her proprietary modeling software became legendary among the junior analysts. Rachel had taught herself Python programming during law school, combining her legal mind's attention to detail with her mathematical intuition to create predictive algorithms that could forecast acquisition success rates with 87% accuracy. The software could process thousands of potential targets simultaneously, ranking them by growth potential, cultural fit, regulatory risk, and integration complexity. But the real breakthrough came when Rachel discovered the demographic disruption window, a 6-month period where traditional banks consistently undervalued fintech companies serving emerging immigrant populations. Her analysis showed that Goldman Sachs could acquire 17 specific targets for a combined $2.3 billion, then leverage their customer bases to dominate financial services for America's fastest-growing demographic segments within 3 years. Wells watched her progress with growing resentment that bordered on pathological jealousy. "She's just a glorified number cruncher with daddy issues," he'd mutter during executive meetings, though his voice carried an edge of genuine fear. Rachel's Goldman Sachs strategy was brilliant enough to make headlines in the Wall Street Journal, sophisticated enough to revolutionize corporate acquisition theory, and valuable enough to establish her as one of the industry's most sought-after consultants. The partnership implications were impossible to ignore. Wells Strategic Consulting had never landed a client worth more than $30 million. Rachel's Goldman Sachs contract would triple their annual revenue and establish the firm as a legitimate competitor to McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. The board of directors had already scheduled preliminary partnership discussions for the week after her presentation. At 30 years old, Rachel would become the youngest partner in the firm's history, with profit-sharing percentages that would make her financially independent within 5 years. Victoria Sterling's arrival 3 weeks before the presentation felt suspicious from the beginning. Her credentials were impeccable: Wharton MBA, Deloitte experience, fluency in Mandarin and Portuguese, but her interest in Rachel's Goldman Sachs research seemed unusually intense. "I'm just trying to learn from the best," Victoria would purr during their forced collaboration sessions, her manicured fingers tracing patterns on Rachel's proprietary charts while asking increasingly specific questions about methodology and client contact information. Rachel noticed Victoria's late-night conversations with Wells through the glass walls of his corner office, their body language suggesting intimacy that went far beyond professional mentorship. Victoria's wardrobe grew progressively more provocative with each passing week, her hemlines rising and necklines plunging until she resembled a high-end escort more than a financial analyst. But Rachel was too focused on perfection to investigate office gossip. The presentation itself had evolved into a multimedia masterpiece. 47 slides of cutting-edge financial analysis, interactive demographic maps showing population migration patterns, live market data feeds demonstrating real-time acquisition opportunities, and video testimonials from Credit Suisse executives praising Rachel's previous work. She'd rehearsed every transition, memorized every statistic, prepared answers for every conceivable question the Goldman Sachs board might ask. 250 international executives would attend the Willis Tower presentation. Representatives from Goldman Sachs' London, Hong Kong, Tokyo, and Frankfurt offices, pension fund managers controlling trillion-dollar portfolios, sovereign wealth fund directors from Norway, Singapore, and Saudi Arabia, the financial media elite from Bloomberg, Reuters, and the Financial Times. Rachel's presentation would be broadcast live to Goldman Sachs offices in 37 countries, potentially influencing investment strategies affecting millions of people worldwide. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd spent 6 months preparing to present in the same building her father had helped construct, the same steel and concrete monument to American capitalism that had nearly killed him during its construction decades earlier. Every morning she touched the memorial plaque in the lobby, honoring the workers who died building Chicago's skyline, including 2 of her father's closest friends. Success would mean everything: partnership, financial security, professional vindication, her father's complete medical recovery. But Rachel had no idea that Harrison Wells would rather destroy his own company than watch a woman who'd rejected his advances become more successful than him, or that Victoria Sterling was already memorizing every detail of her proprietary research while pretending to admire her brilliance. How could Rachel have known that the greatest threat to her dreams wasn't market volatility or client rejection, but the sociopathic jealousy of a man who'd built his entire identity on controlling and conquering the women around him? The security alert bled through Willis Tower's 84th floor at exactly 9:47 a.m., 3 minutes before Rachel's career-defining presentation was scheduled to begin. HVAC emergency detected in executive wing, the automated voice announced through hidden speakers as magnetic locks clicked shut across every bathroom, storage closet, and maintenance area on the floor. Rachel's keycard beeped frantically against the executive bathroom scanner, the red light mocking her growing panic with each failed attempt. Through the marble walls, she could hear Victoria Sterling's heels clicking confidently down the hallway toward the Goldman Sachs boardroom, her voice carrying an unmistakable note of triumph. "Mr. Wells, I've made some last-minute refinements to the acquisition strategy," Victoria purred, her words slicing through Rachel's chest like a blade. "I think our international guests will be very impressed with the demographic disruption analysis." Rachel's blood turned to ice. The demographic disruption window was her breakthrough discovery, the proprietary algorithm that had taken her 3 months to perfect. Victoria shouldn't even know that terminology existed, let alone understand its implications for Goldman Sachs' expansion strategy. Rachel pounded her fists against the reinforced door, her voice echoing uselessly in the soundproofed bathroom while her life's work was being stolen 200 feet away. The Willis Tower's advanced security system had been designed to contain terrorist threats, with electromagnetic locks that could seal entire floors within seconds. Rachel realized with growing horror that someone with administrative access had triggered a false emergency, trapping her in a steel and marble prison while Victoria walked into the spotlight that belonged to her. The HVAC malfunction was perfectly timed, surgically precise, and absolutely deliberate. In the Goldman Sachs boardroom, 250 of the world's most powerful financial executives were taking their seats around the massive conference table. Marcus Goldman III himself had flown in from New York, accompanied by senior partners from London, Hong Kong, and Frankfurt offices. Norwegian sovereign wealth fund directors sat beside Saudi investment ministers, while Bloomberg reporters prepared to broadcast the presentation live to 37 countries. Rachel's proprietary research was about to be unveiled to the global financial elite, and she was locked in a bathroom like a child. Victoria commanded the room with stunning confidence, her burgundy Hermes dress and diamond jewelry projecting the image of a successful senior consultant who'd earned her place at the table. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying the perfect blend of authority and charm. "Today I'll present a revolutionary approach to mid-market financial services acquisition that will position Goldman Sachs as the dominant force in America's emerging demographic markets." Rachel's slides appeared on the massive wall screens, 47 pages of her life's work, now bearing Victoria's name in elegant gold lettering. The interactive demographic maps that Rachel had spent weeks programming now responded to Victoria's touch, showing population migration patterns and market opportunities with breathtaking precision. The financial modeling software that Rachel had coded herself in Python now projected acquisition targets worth $2.3 billion, each recommendation supported by months of painstaking analysis. "The demographic disruption window represents a paradigm shift in acquisition strategy," Victoria explained, using Rachel's exact terminology with practiced ease. "Traditional banks consistently undervalue fintech companies serving immigrant populations, creating a 6-month opportunity window where Goldman Sachs can acquire premium targets at a fraction of their true value." The Goldman Sachs executives leaned forward with obvious interest, their eyes lighting up as they grasped the profit potential of Rachel's strategy. Marcus Goldman III nodded approvingly as Victoria explained the algorithmic approach to target identification, the cultural integration methodologies, and the projected 3-year return on investment. "Miss Sterling," he interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of old money and older power. "This demographic analysis is extraordinary. How long did your team spend developing this predictive modeling?" Victoria smiled sweetly, her rehearsed answer rolling off her tongue like silk. 18 months of dedicated research, Mr. Goldman. My team and I worked around the clock to perfect every detail." Rachel screamed until her throat was raw, her voice lost in the marble tomb while Victoria accepted praise for discoveries that had cost Rachel her health, her social life, and countless nights of sleep. The proprietary algorithms that Rachel had protected like state secrets were now being demonstrated to competitors who would reverse engineer her methods within weeks. The Goldman Sachs partnership that should have made her the youngest consulting partner in Chicago history was slipping away with every slide Victoria presented. The presentation concluded with thunderous applause that Rachel could hear faintly through the building's ventilation system. Victoria basked in the standing ovation while Goldman Sachs executives shook her hand and exchanged business cards, their faces glowing with the satisfaction of discovering the next big thing in acquisition strategy. "Miss Sterling," Marcus Goldman III announced loudly enough for the Bloomberg cameras to capture, "Goldman Sachs would be honored to implement your demographic disruption strategy immediately. "We're prepared to offer your firm our largest consulting contract in company history." By the time building maintenance discovered the HVAC malfunction and released the magnetic locks, Victoria had signed a $75 million contract using Rachel's research, accepted congratulations from international media, and posed for photographs that would appear in the Wall Street Journal's morning edition. Rachel emerged from her marble prison to find the boardroom empty except for scattered coffee cups and the lingering scent of Victoria's expensive perfume. The security footage would later show that the HVAC emergency had been triggered manually from Harrison Wells' personal computer, but by then Rachel's career was already destroyed, and Victoria Sterling was being hailed as the most innovative consultant of her generation. How could Rachel prove that her life's work had been stolen when everyone believed Victoria was the brilliant strategist who'd revolutionized Goldman Sachs' acquisition approach? The Chicago Tribune's business section arrived at Rachel's apartment the next morning like a funeral wreath. Victoria Sterling's radiant smile beamed from the front page under the headline, "Revolutionary Consulting Strategy Nets Goldman Sachs' Largest Contract Ever." The article praised Victoria's groundbreaking demographic disruption analysis and innovative algorithmic approach to mid-market acquisitions, describing her as the most promising young consultant in Chicago's competitive financial services landscape. Rachel's hands trembled as she read her own words quoted verbatim, her proprietary research methodology explained in detail, her months of painstaking analysis credited to the woman who'd stolen everything while she was trapped in a marble tomb. The article mentioned that Victoria Sterling had been promoted to senior partner at Wells Strategic Consulting, making her the youngest partner in the firm's 15-year history. The irony was devastating. That promotion had been promised to Rachel for successful completion of the Goldman Sachs presentation. Wells Strategic Consulting's Michigan Avenue office felt like a morgue when Rachel arrived Monday morning. Her colleagues avoided eye contact, their whispered conversations dying abruptly when she walked past. The junior analyst who'd once sought her mentorship now treated her like a pariah, clearly believing the official story that Rachel had abandoned her responsibilities during the firm's most crucial client presentation in company history. Harrison Wells called Rachel into his corner office at exactly 10 a.m., his predatory smile wider than she'd ever seen it. Victoria Sterling sat in the leather chair beside his desk, her legs crossed elegantly, her expression radiating smug satisfaction. "Rachel, sweetheart," Wells began, his voice dripping with false concern, "we need to discuss your future with the firm. Your absence during the Goldman Sachs presentation was disappointing." "I was locked in the bathroom," Rachel said through gritted teeth, her voice barely controlled. "The security system malfunctioned and trapped me during the most important presentation of my career." Wells exchanged a meaningful glance with Victoria, both of them struggling to suppress laughter. "Building maintenance confirms there was no malfunction," Wells replied smoothly. "The security logs show you used your keycard to enter the executive bathroom at 9:45 a.m., just minutes before your scheduled presentation. It appears you experienced some kind of performance anxiety." The gaslighting was masterful and vicious. Rachel realized they'd prepared for this conversation, had crafted a narrative that made her appear unstable and unreliable. Victoria leaned forward with mock sympathy, her voice honeyed with condescension. "Rachel, everyone understands that high-pressure situations can be overwhelming. Perhaps a demotion to junior analyst would be less stressful for you. You could learn so much by observing how senior consultants handle major client relationships." The words hit Rachel like physical blows. Junior analyst meant a 60% salary reduction, meant losing the premium health insurance that covered her father's medical treatments, meant watching her career dissolve while Victoria basked in stolen glory. But Wells wasn't finished destroying her. "Of course, your new position comes with significantly reduced compensation," he continued, savoring every word. "Entry-level analysts earn $68,000 annually, which should still be sufficient for a single woman with minimal financial obligations." Rachel's vision blurred with rage and desperation. Wells knew exactly what he was doing. The medical bills for her father's intensive physical therapy at Northwestern Memorial Hospital cost $8,500 monthly, nearly double her new salary after taxes. The premium family health insurance that covered experimental rehabilitation treatments would be replaced with basic coverage that classified her father's therapy as non-essential. Wells was forcing her to choose between professional dignity and her father's ability to walk again. That afternoon, Rachel drove to Northwestern Memorial Hospital's rehabilitation wing to find her father Robert struggling through his daily physical therapy session. The 60-year-old construction foreman, who'd once carried steel beams up 40-story buildings, now needed assistance standing from his wheelchair. His left leg remained largely paralyzed from the scaffolding accident, but the specialized therapy offered hope for partial mobility recovery within 2 years. "How's the big presentation going, sweetheart?" Robert asked, his weathered face lighting up with pride. Rachel had planned to tell him about the partnership promotion, the salary increase that would pay for his treatment without financial stress. Instead, she watched him grimace through painful exercises while calculating how many sessions they could afford on her reduced income. "It went well, Dad," she lied, her voice catching. "Really well." Dr. Patricia Chen, Robert's rehabilitation specialist, pulled Rachel aside after the session. "Your father's progress has been remarkable, but we're approaching a critical juncture," she explained quietly. "The next 6 months of intensive therapy will determine whether he regains significant mobility or remains wheelchair dependent. The specialized treatment isn't covered by basic insurance plans, but given his improvement rate, I strongly recommend continuing the current protocol." Rachel nodded numbly, mentally calculating impossible math. Her new salary couldn't cover both Robert's medical expenses and basic living costs. She'd have to choose between her father's recovery and financial survival, exactly the trap Wells had designed. The sociopathic precision of his revenge was breathtaking. He'd destroyed her career, while ensuring she remained financially dependent on the job that humiliated her daily. Walking through the hospital corridors, Rachel noticed Jennifer Martinez sitting in the family waiting area, her laptop open and financial documents spread across the table. Jennifer was a senior financial analyst at Wells Strategic Consulting, a quiet woman in her early 30s who'd always been professional but distant. Their eyes met and Jennifer gestured for Rachel to sit down. "I know what happened to you," Jennifer said quietly, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I've been analyzing Wells' expense reports for the past year, and there are patterns that don't make sense. Mysterious payments to offshore consulting firms, unexplained travel expenses to the Cayman Islands, and regular wire transfers to accounts I can't trace." Rachel felt her pulse quicken as Jennifer continued. "Someone's been laundering money through the firm's client accounts, and I think Wells is involved in something much bigger than presentation theft." Jennifer leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I also know Victoria Sterling didn't create that Goldman Sachs strategy. The writing style, the mathematical approach, even the terminology. It's completely different from her previous work. But here's what really bothers me. Wells has been receiving calls from someone named Patricia in Boston who seems to know intimate details about his financial operations and personal life." Rachel's mind raced as Jennifer shared her suspicions. If Wells was involved in financial crimes, that information could be leveraged for justice. But how could two women with limited resources investigate a powerful CEO who controlled their employment and had demonstrated his willingness to destroy anyone who threatened him? How far would Wells go to protect his secrets? And what price would Rachel and Jennifer pay for seeking the truth about his criminal activities? Rachel and Jennifer's clandestine investigation began in the most mundane place imaginable, the firm's supply closet on the 23rd floor of Wells Strategic Consulting's Michigan Avenue headquarters. Every evening after 8 p.m., when the cleaning crew finished their rounds and the building settled into silence, the two women would meet among boxes of printer paper and toner cartridges to piece together Harrison Wells' criminal empire. Jennifer Martinez had always possessed an accountant's eye for financial anomalies, but Wells' expense reports read like a masterclass in creative fraud. "Look at this," she whispered, spreading Wells Strategic Consulting's quarterly statements across a makeshift table of supply boxes. Wells claimed $847,000 in international consulting fees last year, but I can't find corresponding client contracts or deliverable documentation. The payments all go to something called Bermuda Strategic Solutions, which doesn't appear in any legitimate business registry I can access." Rachel studied the financial documents with growing excitement, her analytical mind immediately grasping the implications. Wells wasn't just a sexual predator and presentation thief. He was systematically looting his own company through elaborate money laundering schemes. The pattern became clearer as Jennifer revealed months of suspicious activity: mysterious wire transfers to Cayman Islands accounts, unexplained travel expenses to offshore banking centers, and consulting contracts with shell companies that existed only on paper. "The really interesting part," Jennifer continued, pulling out a thick folder of phone records, "is these calls to Boston. Every Tuesday and Friday at exactly 3 p.m., Wells receives calls from a number registered to Patricia Wells. The conversations last between 45 minutes and 2 hours, and they always coincide with major financial transactions in his offshore accounts." Rachel's pulse quickened as she examined the phone records. Patricia Wells wasn't just a business associate. The timing and frequency of their calls suggested an intimate relationship involving detailed financial coordination. Jennifer, what if Patricia Wells isn't just his business partner? What if she's his wife? The implications were staggering. If Wells was married while presenting himself as single to employees, clients, and investors, that deception could be leveraged for blackmail or exposure. Their investigation required careful planning and significant risk. Wells controlled every aspect of their professional lives, held their financial security hostage, and had demonstrated his willingness to destroy anyone who threatened his power. But Rachel's rage over her stolen presentation and Jennifer's genuine outrage over corporate fraud created an alliance that transcended personal safety considerations. Jennifer's access to the firm's financial systems proved invaluable for gathering evidence systematically. Late-night database searches revealed that Wells had been siphoning client funds through fictitious consulting fees for nearly 3 years. The Bermuda Strategic Solutions payments totaled $3.2 million, while Cayman Islands wire transfers approached $8.7 million. Most damaging of all, Wells had been underreporting taxable income to the IRS by approximately $12 million annually, using offshore shell companies to hide profits that should have triggered federal tax obligations. Rachel's legal education from Harvard Law School became crucial for understanding the criminal implications of their discoveries. Jennifer, this isn't just corporate theft. Wells is committing multiple federal felonies: tax evasion, wire fraud, money laundering, securities violations. We're looking at potential prison sentences of 15 to 20 years if we can prove intent and systematic concealment. The breakthrough came during their 3rd week of investigation when Jennifer discovered Wells' personal travel records buried in administrative files. His passport showed regular trips to Boston that coincided exactly with the mysterious phone calls from Patricia Wells. Hotel receipts revealed stays at the Four Seasons Boston, but the billing information showed joint occupancy with someone whose name had been carefully redacted from company expense reports. Rachel suggested a direct approach that would either confirm their suspicions or expose them to catastrophic retaliation. We need to call Patricia Wells directly and see how she responds when we mention Harrison's name. If she's just a business associate, she'll treat it professionally. If she's his wife, her reaction will tell us everything we need to know. The phone call happened on a rainy Thursday evening from Jennifer's apartment in Lincoln Park. Both women gathered around her kitchen table with notebooks and recording equipment borrowed from Rachel's journalism major roommate. Rachel dialed the Boston number with trembling fingers, her heart hammering as the phone rang 3 times before a cultured female voice answered. "Hello, this is Judge Patricia Wells speaking." The title hit Rachel like an electric shock. Judge. Harrison Wells' secret wife was a federal judge, which meant their discovery had implications far beyond corporate fraud. Rachel struggled to keep her voice steady as she launched into her prepared explanation. "Judge Wells, my name is Rachel Thompson and I work at Wells Strategic Consulting in Chicago. I'm calling because I've discovered some concerning financial irregularities involving your husband Harrison, and I believe you should be aware of potential legal implications." The silence on the other end stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Judge Patricia Wells responded, her voice carrying the cold authority of someone accustomed to controlling courtroom proceedings. "Ms. Thompson, I'm aware of my husband's business activities in Chicago, including his consulting firm and his professional relationships. Are you suggesting he's involved in criminal conduct?" Rachel took a deep breath and plunged forward with carefully chosen words. "Judge Wells, I have documentation showing that Harrison has been hiding millions of dollars in offshore accounts, underreporting taxable income, and using shell companies to launder money through your joint business ventures. Additionally, he's been presenting himself as unmarried to employees and clients while conducting inappropriate relationships with female staff members." The judge's sharp intake of breath was audible through the phone, followed by a long pause that suggested she was processing devastating information. When she spoke again, her voice carried the lethal precision of someone preparing for legal warfare. "Ms. Thompson, I need you to send me every document you've discovered immediately. My husband's deception regarding our marriage is one matter, but if he's committing federal tax crimes while using our joint financial accounts, he's exposed me to criminal liability as well." Rachel and Jennifer exchanged triumphant glances as Judge Patricia Wells continued. "I want you to understand something clearly. I've spent 18 years building my reputation as a federal judge, and I will not allow Harrison's criminal behavior to destroy my career. If your evidence is legitimate, I will ensure he faces the full consequences of federal prosecution." The conversation concluded with Judge Wells providing her secure email address and demanding that Rachel and Jennifer compile comprehensive evidence packages within 72 hours. She also revealed crucial information about Harrison's financial structure, confirming that several offshore accounts were opened using forged documents that listed her as a co-owner without her knowledge or consent. That weekend, Rachel and Jennifer worked around the clock to organize their evidence into a prosecutable case. Bank records, email communications, travel receipts, phone logs, client contracts, and tax documents were compiled into a devastating portrait of systematic federal crimes spanning nearly 4 years. They also gathered security footage from Wells Strategic Consulting, showing Harrison's deliberate sabotage of Rachel's Goldman Sachs presentation, including timestamps proving he manually triggered the HVAC emergency that trapped her in the executive bathroom. Monday morning brought unexpected vindication when Judge Patricia Wells called to confirm she had reviewed their evidence and contacted the IRS Criminal Investigation Division immediately. Ms. Thompson, your documentation is sufficient for federal prosecution on multiple charges. Harrison will be arrested within the week, and I've initiated divorce proceedings that will freeze all our joint assets until criminal charges are resolved. But Rachel realized their investigation had created a dangerous window where Wells remained free and increasingly paranoid. His behavior at the office had become erratic, with shouting matches behind closed doors and suspicious questions about who had accessed financial files recently. Victoria Sterling appeared nervous and distracted, suggesting that Wells might be preparing for desperate measures to protect himself. How long could Rachel and Jennifer maintain their facade of normal employment while federal investigators gathered additional evidence? And what would Wells do if he discovered their role in exposing his criminal empire? The Wells Strategic Consulting Annual Investor Gala at the Four Seasons Chicago was supposed to be Harrison Wells' moment of ultimate triumph. 200 guests filled the Crystal Ballroom, Fortune 500 CEOs, Goldman Sachs executives, and Chicago's financial elite, celebrating the firm's record-breaking year built on Rachel's stolen research. Wells stood at the podium in his $8,000 Armani tuxedo, raising champagne to toast Victoria Sterling's revolutionary consulting breakthrough that had generated $75 million in new contracts. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wells announced, his voice echoing through the glittering ballroom, "tonight we celebrate the innovative genius of our newest senior partner, Victoria Sterling, whose demographic disruption strategy has positioned Wells Strategic Consulting as Chicago's premier." The ballroom doors exploded open with the force of federal authority. Judge Patricia Wells strode through the entrance flanked by 6 federal marshals, her black judicial robes replaced by an elegant navy suit that commanded immediate attention. Every conversation died as 300 heads turned toward the woman whose presence radiated legal vengeance. Behind her walked IRS criminal investigation agents carrying boxes of evidence and arrest warrants. Wells' champagne glass shattered against the marble floor as his wife of 18 years approached the podium with predatory precision. "Harrison," Judge Wells announced, her voice cutting through the stunned silence like a blade, "I believe you've been expecting me." The federal marshals moved to flank him as she continued loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're under arrest for tax evasion, money laundering, wire fraud, and securities violations totaling $12 million in hidden offshore accounts." The ballroom erupted in chaos as Chicago's business elite scrambled to distance themselves from the unfolding scandal. Victoria Sterling tried to escape through the kitchen entrance but found herself blocked by federal agents who'd been stationed at every exit. "Mrs. Sterling," Judge Wells called out sweetly, "you're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and theft of intellectual property." Rachel Thompson watched from the mezzanine level, her heart hammering with vindication as Wells was handcuffed in front of the same Goldman Sachs executives who'd applauded Victoria's stolen presentation. The IRS agents had promised her a $3.7 million whistleblower reward, 28% of the recovered tax fraud, enough to pay for her father's complete medical treatment and launch her own consulting firm. Judge Wells approached the microphone one final time, addressing the stunned investors with judicial authority. "For those wondering about the validity of Wells Strategic Consulting's recent Goldman Sachs contract, I suggest you review the actual creator of that strategy, Ms. Rachel Thompson, whose intellectual property was stolen through corporate sabotage, orchestrated by my soon-to-be ex-husband." 6 months later, Rachel cut the ribbon on Thompson Strategic Solutions' Michigan Avenue headquarters, with her father Robert standing proudly beside her on legs strengthened by the best physical therapy money could buy. Goldman Sachs had become their first client, specifically requesting Rachel's authentic expertise over Victoria's fraudulent presentation. Wells received 15 years in federal prison while his empire crumbled into bankruptcy, proving that sometimes justice arrives exactly when it's needed most.